The sun was dipping low over the Louisiana bayou, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt of Highway 90, when Senator John Kennedy felt the first flicker of unease. He'd been driving back from a town hall meeting in Baton Rouge, his mind replaying the heated debates on healthcare and education, when the blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror. Pulling over seemed routine. After all, he was no stranger to the road or the occasional speeding ticket. But as the officer approached, gun drawn and voice barking like a rabid dog, John realized this wasn't just a stop. It was a standoff that would unravel lives in ways no one could predict. John Kennedy, the silver-haired senator with the folksy drawl and sharp wit that had endeared him to constituents across the South, gripped the steering wheel tighter. At 73, he'd seen his share of storms, political battles in Washington, personal losses that still ached like old wounds. His wife, Becky, had passed from cancer 5 years earlier, leaving him to raise their grandson, Jack, alone. Jack was the light in his darkening world, a bright-eyed 12-year-old with dreams of becoming a pilot. That evening, John was hurrying home to make it to Jack's school play, a simple adaptation of To Kill a Mockingbird, where the boy played scout. The thought of missing it gnawed at him, but now, with a gun pointed at his temple through the open window, time froze. "Get out of the car. Now," the officer shouted, his face twisted in rage. Officer Mark Harlan, a 35-year-old veteran of the local police force, had been on edge all day. Budget cuts had slashed his department's resources, and a recent string of burglaries in the area had left him paranoid and exhausted. Mark wasn't a bad man at heart. He'd joined the force to protect his community, inspired by his father's stories of heroism during Hurricane Katrina. But life had worn him down. His marriage to Sarah was crumbling under the weight of long shifts and unspoken resentments, and their 2 young daughters barely saw him anymore. Today, a tip about a suspicious vehicle matching John's description, a black SUV, had set him off. It was a mix-up, a radio dispatch error, but in that moment, fear blinded him. John's heart pounded as he raised his hands slowly, his glasses slipping down his nose. "Officer, I'm Senator John Kennedy. There's no need for the weapon. I'm complying." His voice was steady, honed from years on the Senate floor, but inside, terror gripped him. He thought of Becky, how she'd fought so bravely against her illness, whispering in her final days, "John, promise me you'll live for Jack. Show him what courage looks like." Now, with the cold barrel inches from his face, John wondered if this was how it ended, not in a debate hall, but on a lonely stretch of road. Mark's finger hovered near the trigger, his mind racing. He'd pulled over what he thought was a fugitive's vehicle, but the man before him looked like someone's grandfather, not a criminal. Doubt flickered, but pride and adrenaline pushed it aside. "I said get out," he yelled, yanking the door open. John stepped out carefully, his suit rumpled from the long drive, hands still raised. Passers-by slowed their cars, phones emerging from windows to capture the scene. One woman, a local teacher named Elena Ramirez, pulled over entirely, her own history of racial profiling making her heart ache in solidarity. As John stood there, vulnerable under the fading light, memories flooded him. He recalled his humble beginnings in Zachary, Louisiana, working on his family's farm, learning the value of hard work and integrity. Politics had called him later, a way to fight for the forgotten folks, the farmers, the teachers, the single parents scraping by. But power came with enemies, and John had made plenty, railing against corruption and big government overreach. Was this payback, a setup, or just a tragic mistake? Mark ordered John to the ground, cuffs clicking as he secured them too tightly. "You're under arrest for resisting," he growled, though John hadn't resisted at all. The senator winced, his arthritic knees protesting against the gravel. In that humiliating position, John felt a surge of anger, not just for himself, but for every citizen who'd faced similar abuse. He thought of the stories he'd heard in committee hearings, innocent people terrorized by overzealous officers, lives derailed by split-second decisions. "Son, you're making a mistake," John said calmly. "Check my ID. Call it in." But Mark wasn't listening. He radioed for backup, his voice laced with false confidence. Unbeknownst to him, his body camera was rolling, capturing every aggressive word, every unnecessary shove. Elena, from her car, live-streamed the encounter on social media, her commentary urgent. "This is Senator Kennedy. What's going on here?" Views skyrocketed as the video spread like wildfire across platforms. Back at home, Jack paced the living room, glancing at the clock. The play started in an hour, and Grandpa had promised to be there. Jack's mother, John's daughter, had died in a car accident when he was 5, leaving John as his sole guardian. The boy idolized his grandfather, mimicking his Southern sayings and dreaming of one day joining him in Washington. But tonight, anxiety twisted in Jack's gut. He called John's phone, but it went to voicemail. Meanwhile, on the highway, backup arrived. 2 more officers, including Sergeant Lisa Thompson, a no-nonsense veteran with 20 years on the force. Lisa had trained Mark years ago and knew his hot-headed tendencies. As she approached, she recognized John immediately from news clips. "Harlan, what the hell is this?" she demanded, her eyes widening at the gun still holstered but recently drawn. Mark stammered. He matched the description: black SUV, possible armed suspect. But Lisa checked the dispatch logs on her tablet. That's not right. The suspect vehicle was a sedan, not an SUV. And this is Senator Kennedy, for God's sake. She uncuffed John, helping him to his feet with apologies tumbling out. John's wrists were raw, but his dignity remained intact. "Ma'am, I appreciate that. But this officer needs to be held accountable. He pulled a gun without cause." The next 5 minutes unfolded like a whirlwind. Lisa reviewed Mark's body cam footage on the spot, her face paling as she saw the unnecessary escalation. Alina's livestream had already garnered thousands of views, with comments flooding in from across the country. Calls poured into the department, demanding action. Mark's world crumbled as Lisa placed him under arrest for assault and misconduct. "You're coming with me, Harlan," she said, her voice heavy with disappointment. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists, the same ones he'd used on John. As Mark was led to the patrol car, regret washed over him. He thought of Sarah and the girls, how he'd promised to be a better husband, a better father. This job, meant to be his calling, had turned him into someone he didn't recognize. Tears stung his eyes as he whispered, "I'm sorry, Senator. I messed up bad." John nodded, his expression softening. "We all mess up, son. But it's what we do next that counts." He shook the dust from his suit and climbed back into his SUV, determined not to miss Jack's play. But the incident lingered, a catalyst for deeper reflection. Word spread quickly. By the time John arrived at the school auditorium, his phone buzzed with messages from colleagues, reporters, and even the governor. Jack bounded into his arms backstage, oblivious at first. "Grandpa, you made it." But seeing the bruises on John's wrists, the boy's face fell. What happened? Over the following days, the story exploded nationally. John used his platform to speak out, not with vengeance, but with empathy. In a press conference, he shared his fear, his thoughts of Becky and Jack, humanizing the moment. "This isn't just about me," he said, his voice cracking. "It's about every American who deserves fairness from those sworn to protect us. Officer Harlan isn't a monster, he's a man under pressure, like so many. But accountability saves lives." Mark's arrest led to an internal investigation. He was suspended, facing charges, but John advocated for reform rather than ruin. "Let's train our officers better, support their mental health," John urged in Senate hearings. Mark, from his holding cell, watched the coverage, moved by the senator's grace. Sarah visited him, tears in her eyes. "We can fix this, Mark. Together." Their daughters drew pictures of him in uniform, labeled, "My Hero Daddy," reminding him of why he started. Elena, the teacher who filmed it, became an unexpected ally. She and John met for coffee, sharing stories of injustice. Elena had immigrated from Mexico as a child, facing discrimination that fueled her activism. "You gave me hope that day," she told him. Inspired, she started a community program teaching youth about civil rights. Jack, too, grew from the experience. At school, he spoke up against bullying, echoing his grandfather's lessons. "Courage isn't about not being scared," John told him one evening, as they fished in the bayou. "It's about doing right anyway." Jack nodded, casting his line. "Like you did, Grandpa." Months passed, and the case resolved. Mark pleaded guilty to lesser charges, receiving probation and mandatory counseling. He left the force but found purpose volunteering with at-risk youth, sharing his story as a cautionary tale. "I pulled a gun on an innocent man," he'd say. "But he showed me mercy. That's real strength." John continued his work in Washington, pushing for police reform bills that balanced accountability with support for officers. He remarried. No, but he found peace in small joys, watching Jack graduate, attending Alina's program launches. The incident, once a nightmare, became a beacon. In the end, what began with a gun drawn in fear ended in redemption for all. John's message rang clear. In a divided world, empathy bridges the gaps. Stand firm in your truth, extend grace to the fallen, and justice, not vengeance, will light the way forward. It's a lesson etched in the hearts of those involved, inspiring countless others to choose kindness over chaos, hope over hate.